Hey there, everybody. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another episode of Friday Morning at the Funhouse. Alongside, as always, Mr. Martin Popoff. What's happening, Martin?
Yes, morning, sir. Morning, sir. Fall is here. We got to put the clocks back shortly. It's
Yeah,
definitely very cold in Toronto.
yeah. It's we had frost on the ground this morning, frost on the ground yesterday, so that means less than 32 degrees here in the States. But yeah, it's definitely fall, and it's funny. I went and had dinner with my parents last night. We walked out of the restaurant. It was like quarter to six because we eat early here. And the first thing my mom said when we walked outside, it was just starting to get a little dark. And she goes, come Monday, it will be pitch black if we walked outside at this
Yeah,
hour. I said, yeah, come 4:30, it'll be dark, but this will be a little lighter in the morning, right? Instead of like
yeah,
7 o'clock, it's still dark out now.
yeah, for
Now it'll
sure.
be back bright and shiny at 6 a.m. And my
Yeah.
dogs will be like, hey, Daddy, it's time to get up. I'm like, no, sleep a little while longer, please.
I called my mechanic to like say, hey, yeah, I thought it was early, right? Hey, let's schedule get my winter tires on. He says I'm fully booked till November 30th, so I got to go the whole month hoping it doesn't snow.
Oh
So
boy. Yeah, I've seen snow in various places around North America from various photos on Facebook and stuff. So
yeah,
it's coming. It's coming. Well, hopefully you're safe on that, Martin.
yeah, yeah.
Hopefully you won't have to worry about it till the end of the month, but you never know. You never know. Anyway, today we've decided, because everybody is talking about Hackney Diamonds, we have decided to do a little Rolling Stone Hackney Diamonds revisit, because Martin and I both reviewed the new Rolling Stones record, which is this one right here, on the here on Sea of Tranquility and on the Contrarians. A lot of different comments. Martin and I think have different opinions on the album. So a lot of people were asking, it's like, well, you guys should get together and talk about it. And it'd be great to hear both of these different opinions. But we wanted to take it one step further, is we went and looked at all the comments, because both videos got a lot of views and a lot of comments. And we said, why don't we like grab some comments from each of the videos? And Martin specifically went on to SOT, grabbed some SOT comments, and I did the same on the Contrarians. And we're each going to kind of comment on some of these reader comments, and we'll mention who made the comments as best we can, and kind of talk a little bit more about the album. And kind of, I guess it'll be cool to hear the viewer's perspective on not only our reviews, but on the album as well, their views on the album and kind of our comments on that. So with all that being said, I'll have Martin kick us off with his first comment from Sea Tranquility viewer.
Actually, my first comment, I just thought of this. I wasn't gonna bring this up, but I wanted to go back to the wheels fell off episode for a minute, right? I got a lot of abuse for the Iron Maiden end of things, right, on that one, and I just wanted to clear the air on this, right? It's like it's funny. It's almost like when you write magazine articles and then someone puts the heading on the article or the subhead or whatever. So our heading for the show was pretty harsh, right? The wheels are falling off, right? But you know, my point with the Iron Maiden thing, and I still believe this. I think Iron Maiden wound up with a great sound, an amazing sound full of personality on Peace of Mind, and then didn't really change for the rest of their career. I totally stand by that, right? But I didn't mean that the wheels are falling off on Power Slave. I mean, I love Power Slave as much as everybody else does, right? But I definitely remember getting it and thinking, this is the same sound. And I was happy for it, right? So that was the point I wanted to make.
I'm glad you brought it up, because even me reading I mean, there were a lot of comments about that. We never once said, and this is the key, if you really listen to what we were talking about in this episode, we never once said that those are sucky albums, that they're no good. We're basically just saying there are elements and things that happened. There were circumstances that happened where the wheels were starting to fall off, maybe from the point of that album and afterwards. Not necessarily that the albums are really bad. Maybe we might have issues with some of those albums for little things we discussed, but yeah, I mean, Power Slave, we even said it. We both love Power Slave. There's
Yeah.
nothing, can't say anything bad about it. But you gave the point. I even mentioned, I think, that for me, Maiden, the wheels fell off at other times, perhaps. But you
Yeah.
made the point about Power Slave, and that was what it was all about.
Yeah, and we even made the point that, you know, it's interesting. You can say, when does it start? When does it start that the wheels fall off, and when are they really falling off, right? So I added that as an asterisk. That yeah, and as you can see, yeah, you can definitely pick points all along. But yeah, my whole point was that this is where there's 5% or 10% even of starting to repeat yourself. And that's a form of wheels falling off, but I didn't mean it to be so negative. So there you go.
Yeah, I think just people just kind of automatically assume, because there was one comment that said, you guys are being awfully negative in the last couple episodes. And I'm like, this really isn't a negative episode. This is more just talking about albums in notable bands' careers where, the cracks are starting to show for whatever reason, not necessarily in a bad way, but whatever. But Martin, and I apologize everybody for coughing up a storm here. It's for whatever reason I got a little frog in my throat. Obviously people enjoyed the topic because it's been the most viewed video we've done over the last couple of months. So obviously it resonates with a lot of people, but just so everybody understands, not to deviate from today's topic, but for whatever reason, any video we do on this channel, on the Contrarians, whatever, that has somewhat of a slightly negative slant does big business. We don't make that up. We don't choose that. That's just the way it goes. Because Martin and I have done lots of videos of late that are really, really positive about whatever it is we're talking about. And people seem to have less interest in that. So for those of you who come down on us for doing stuff on occasion that maybe is slightly negative, there's a reason why we do that, because that's what people want to see. We don't like doing that all the time, but you have to every now and then, because that's what people want to see. We love talking positive about things, and we could do that every single episode, every single week. But there's a big chunk of the audience that gets tired of that real quick. So just wanted to clear that up.
Yeah, well, and speaking of negative, I mean, this is going to be a mix of negatives and positives as well, because I think my review was even of Hackney Diamonds was even seen as a little more negative than I meant it to be. But I'm still standing by that, and I'm almost doubling down on the point I wanted to make in that. So yeah, so our idea here was read a review. I'm going to read two, because the first one obviously is very light here. So first review from Lex Peter 735. Pete, have a chat with Martin. He absolutely panned it. You two could do a show on the pros and cons of the album. Okay, well, there you go. And then C. Richards, 1986, says, some of the tracks you're not fond of will likely grow on you over time. It's a fun, energetic, lively, and catchy album. I'm thrilled to see you live by the sword. This is them talking about you. As I've heard many reviews that don't like it. Some think it shouldn't have been included. Are you kidding? It rocks. Thanks, Pete. Okay, so to get things going, the main negative point of my review was that I actually spent a bunch of time researching for this episode on a really weird topic. I think it was Daniel at Dark Journalist said in one of his episodes. Frank Capra once said, he said, somebody said, oh, what do you think of television? What do you think of TV? And he says, I don't watch TV because commercials make me hate humanity, right? I feel that way about pop. I hate pop so much. Pop makes me so angry. And I've said this before I think talking to you, Pete, that I saw a quote, I think it was from Kirk Hammett, who said pop made him angry, right? And I'm exactly the same age as Kirk Hammett, right? So this thing that really bothers me, I can't stand, and this is why I don't like modern day Def Leppard as well, right? I can't stand, my antenna goes up when I hear these saccharine pop melodies that are done on pop music, across genres. It could be very light hip hoppy pop, or even more guitar, bass, and drums pop, right? But there's something in certain vocal melody things that you hear, and then auto tuning, and then just kind of making people sound a little perfect that might not have something to do with auto tuning, that grabbed me about parts of this album that I really don't like. And so we've got Andrew Wadden here. He's a producer. He's 33 years old. And very significantly, he produced the last two Ozzy Osbourne albums, where you're feeling there's a lack of Ozzy's personality on there. And there's this new pop thing that comes out of nowhere. And where does it come from? I think it comes from the producer, right? And I feel like that's sort of happening on this album. Now, not to say everything on one review. Let's go to some of the more specifics of this last one. So tracks grow on you over time. I'm noticing that as well. I feel like some of these tracks are growing on me over time, but there are, as we go along, I'll mention 5 or 6 of these pop pitfall parts that are almost an album breaker for me, a deal breaker for me. I can't unhear that narrative in my head where I'm feeling like there's like a member of this band who's almost like an equal to Mick and Keith on here, and it's the producer, right? Um, so, and then he says it's an energetic, lively, and catchy album. It's all of those things. It is energetic and lively, which are too positive. It's too catchy in places. That's what I mean. There's this part in Mess It Up where you hear then it goes dee 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 dee, which sounds like a fiddle and a synthesizer fiddle, and I hear that sound in pop all the time. That's the worst 2 or 3 seconds on this whole album for me, and there's a bunch of choruses like that. So there's some parts that really like make me okay. I went and played A Bigger Bang this morning again. There's none of that on that. Don Was produced the last 3. There's none of this this new young person's pop sound on any of those last 3 albums, right? And then he mentions Live by the Sword, which is actually one of my favorites on here. Where do I have that here? Yeah, Live by the Sword. Definitely. That's the one with Charlie on it. I mean, I totally like this one. And it's missing any of those pop red flags on it. So that's what I like about that. I'll stop there. That's a lot from the first 2 reviews.
So I will say right off the bat, one of the reasons why I enjoy this album so much, and one of the reasons why their last 3 albums don't really, I like them, but they haven't really resonated with me, is because I'm missing all the hooks on those albums. One of the things that I like so much about Some Girls and Tattoo You and Emotional Rescue, and even Steel Wheels to an extent, is there are some good pop hooks on those albums. There's a lot of great choruses. There's a lot of really good choruses on here. I don't mind that aspect at all. I think this album rocks. I think it's mellow when it needs to be. And I really appreciate all the memorable choruses and hooks. And does it maybe sound like they're trying too hard? Maybe this is because I think I agree with you 100%, Martin. I think Andrew Watt is responsible for a lot of that, because that was one of the issues I have with the Ozzy albums as well. But that's Ozzy and the Stones are 2 different things for me. I mean, I tried like recently, I put on Bridges to Babylon. I think it's a pretty good album, but I just don't find much of it all that memorable. I found this album pretty memorable from the very first listen. So I kind of like that aspect of this record, so it resonates with me for those reasons. So, and I'll kind of stop there so we can move on to other questions and other comments.
So now you want to read off 2 comments, say?
Yeah, so now I'm going to the Contrarians review. So here from Mr. Mortadella 1 says it's a fun album with catchy grooves and choruses, is what the Stones are, and bravo to them for still being able to pull it off at their age. This guy, meaning Martin, is analyzing it like he's performing an autopsy. He can't see the forest from the trees. The Stones have always had a pop feel to their music, but with more soul. Just listen to it and enjoy the ride. And then I'll read another one just like you did. And this is from Daddlin. Says, come on, we're in uncharted territory here for a bunch of 80-year-old rockers. I think this is a great comeback album. It's vibrant and sounds like the Stones. I will agree. I think it does sound very vibrant. And maybe, Martin, part of it is I honestly didn't expect much from this record, because I know how old the Stones are. I know how long they've been around. I know their history. And I think my kind of reaction to the last bunch of albums has been, good, right? Nothing exceptional. So for me, I think the fact that they put out an album like this so late in their career, when probably most people had low expectations for this record, I can appreciate that, and I think that has a lot to do with how much I'm appreciating this album. I think, I look at like how many albums I have to listen to these days, and how like for so many of them, you listen to 1, 2, 3, 4 times, and you're still not really grasping all that's there. I found after the first listen to this, I was already remembering these songs and remembering these choruses and things. And that's what a good record for me is supposed to do, whether it's the Rolling Stones or anybody else. So, and I think this album rocks. I mean, I listened to it twice this morning again. getting ready. I've been up, quite early this morning, and just like, wow, this is, slashing guitars of Keith and Ronnie, and all the things we love about it. Do I wish they were, do I wish Charlie was still around? Yeah. We'll probably at some point, I'm sure, talk about the drumming on the album, which I think both of us have a little bit of an issue with. But overall, I think, mix sounds great. Songs are hooky. I don't have an issue with it.
Okay. I'll get into a couple more songs just to be a little more positive. Again, I really like Get Close, but I really can't stand the pre-chorus and the chorus in that. So it's a little bit of a deal breaker, but okay. No, I'll agree with you. It rocks. And I have no issue with any of the guitars and any of the riffs on it. It just seems to be in some of these pre-choruses and choruses. And when we say the Stones had pop, it's just that the language and definition and the chord sequences of pop has changed in the last 10 years or so. And that's what I'm hearing on here. It's a different pop, right? Yeah, Bite My Head Off's pretty good. Might be a little try hard, but it is pretty good. Whole Wide World is pretty good, except when we get to the chorus, terrible.
Really? Oh, I love the chorus of that. I think Wide World might be my Whole Wide World might be my top three for me on this
okay
album.
All right. But okay, so Live by the Sword, totally like that one. And Charlie is on that, Bill Wyman's on that one. Driving Me Too Hard, really like that one as well. But again, atrocious pre-chorus and chorus. And the chorus is too much like the verse. Tell Me Straight, the Keith one, totally love it. No problem there. I love almost every time Keith sings a song, not only because of his vocal, it just seems to be on these really interesting kind of dark, slower songs quite often, right? Sweet Sounds of Heaven, that people are divided on that. I totally love it. I think it's great. I think the blues thing's a little bit of a throwaway. My point on that one is they almost threw in all the vintage, anything they were going to do vintage, they threw into that last thing and made it so vintage. It's just creaky, right? It's just really vintage, right? But yeah, where was that part? There's is it on on Get Close at the 57-second mark? That is one of the worst parts of the whole album as well. It's just this crooning Mick being given, it seems, or adopting because he likes pop, but for some reason he's doing some vocal melodies on here that are so corporate and pop that it just kind of rubs me the wrong way. Okay, let me read two more comments here. I've picked comments that make fun of me, and some of these, I don't know if that gets to this, and there's this pretty scathing one at the end, so hang around. But so BG5869 says, Angry and Sweet Sounds of Heaven grabbed me right away. Both are genuinely good Rolling Stone songs that would have stood out at any point in their career. I loved Angry to begin with, but now I'm starting to not, I'm hearing that narrative, that I can't unhear it narrative, right? That puts a ceiling on this record for me, even though I'm warming to at least half of it, right? Let's see. Songs would have stood out at any point in the career. In other words, they don't need to be graded on a curve due to the late stage of their career. I think those are probably the best songs in the album, which may be why they were released first. But as someone who tends to be more critical than most when reviewing new albums by old bands, I can honestly say most of the album is genuinely good. There are a few songs here that I probably won't feel need to hear twice, but there are a few that I think are genuinely among the best in the Stones catalog. Douglas Weston 126 says, Me Again, surprised you didn't like Whole Wide World, a killer track, love it, one of my many faves on the album. I think a few will grow on you with repeated listens. I want to make another point. You said you don't expect much of the Stones at this point. I expect a lot of the Stones because number one, they got a lot of handlers and helpers. Number two, you could basically 2 weeks from now or 3 weeks from now, you could probably AI together a Rolling Stones album. And as long as you got the, approval of Mick and Keith, you could put that out and make it amazing. Right. So I expect a lot from all these guys. Right. And especially with these long incubation periods, and they're great songwriters. And then that sensible thing you and I talk about all the time. It's like, well, you're supposed to get better, right? I was just talking to Blitz from Overkill the other day. He totally made this point. It was so beautifully stated by him, right? He basically said, you may feel like Feel the Fire is your favorite Overkill album, but we're way better songwriters now than we used to be, right? And then he goes, as long as we keep it fresh. But he said, look, it makes sense. We're supposed to be better songwriters now. as we've done this more, right? So I do expect a lot, because I mean, look what happened here. I mean, uh, the problem is, I've lost a little confidence in them, because they seem to have turned over too much of the identity of the band to Andrew Watt. So that's kind of my problem, and I don't feel that happened with Don Was so much, or Don Was just way closer in terms of what they were thinking, kind of thing. But I'll stop there and turn the floor over to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think my low expectations is just because I've just been not all that excited about the last bunch of albums. To me, I don't, like I said, I don't dislike them. I just don't find, I don't go back to them much, because I don't find, like, a lot of what we loved about the Stones from, like, and arguably you can go back even further in the 60s, but the late 60s through the early mid 80s, I just found that spark was missing from some of those albums. I think it's here, and maybe they just needed a producer who was going to bring that back out of them again. I don't know, Martin. To me is the most exciting Rolling Stones album since Some Girls. And I'm not saying, the couple that came after. I like those 80s albums, but I'm finding that there's more what I want to hear from this band on this album than there has been in quite some time.
Yeah.
So let's go to another question here. So from the Sixth Beatle. Very good work as usual, Martin. Love your vids with Pete Pardo, by the way. Anyway, I think people expect too much from the Stones at this advanced point. With that in mind, I find the LP forgettable. I don't think I dislike the record, but it just doesn't stick. Too many guest stars, too many outside influencers. Mick's voice sounds scary. I don't know why it would sound scary. The Watts feel can't be replicated, and for me, the completely overproduced drum tracks give the LP a generic feel. I don't know if they were trying too hard or not trying nearly hard enough. Save your dollars, folks. One place I disagree, Martin, the lyrics are completely stupid. The last review I saw, this Maslow guy claims he is a Stones expert, but his review sounds like a total shill. Thank you for your review, Martin. Yeah, I mean, the overproduced drum tracks. Yeah, I'm not nuts about the drum sound on the album. I don't hate it, but it does sound a little excessive, almost like they were trying to overcompensate by the fact that Charlie's not there anymore. I don't mind the guest stars. So many, like, long-standing veteran legacy legendary bands are doing that nowadays and have been for a long time. I don't really care. It's not like every single song is filled with guest stars. So, I don't mind Lady Gaga and Stevie Wonder coming. I think Lady Gaga sounds great. I would like to hear Lady Gaga do a straight up rock album anyway. She's very talented, whether you love her or hate her. And Mick's voice sounding scary. I think Mick sounds great here. If anything, I think on Tell Me Straight, I think Keith sounds really, really weathered. I don't like that song as much as you do, Martin. I like it more than I did initially. And I really usually like Keith's songs on all these Stones albums. It's one of my least favorite on here. It's so laid back compared to the rest of the album. Maybe that's a good thing. For me, it's just a little too laid back, but I think Mick sounds great on here. However much he's being helped in the studio, I don't know. But as someone who saw the Stones live a couple of years ago, he sounded great then, on after X amount of shows in front of 80,000 people or whatever it was in New Jersey. And I think he sounds phenomenal here for a guy who's like, 80 years old. So for me, I think that's a good thing. But
Well, I think by scary, he means he sounds like he's 40 and he sounds like he likes pop. I think that's kind of what he means, right? And he sounds like he might be, like RoboCop now, like a part of like the Bionic Man, right?
Is there any surprise that Mick likes pop? I mean, listen to Mick's solo albums. That's what they are, right? It doesn't surprise me at all.
Yeah, that's the other interesting thing. I've seen some comments, people saying that it reminds me of what people are saying about Judas Priest these days. This weird comment that, oh, it's a Rob Halford solo album with other players. And people have said of this album, it sounds like a Mick Jagger solo album, right? kind of interesting, right? I wanted guest stars. I totally agree with you on the guest stars. I have no problem with them at all. They're used very tastefully, very sparingly, and really nicely. I mean, it's great to hear Elton John piano and Stevie Wonder. I think it's piano and some organ, and Lady Gaga is perfect for that kind of song and doesn't overdo it, and she's not there twice and all that stuff.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
Paul McCartney, that's a really cool thing too, right? So
And the
yeah,
fact
no
that he's
problem.
playing bass, I mean, that fuzz bass. I mean, I thought that was cool because I think for me, Paul McCartney is one of the most underrated bass players of all time. And
Yeah.
to hear him basically doing that on that song, I think is excellent. It's like, you know, when he comes in on Bite My Head Off, I'm like, listen to that, right? It's like, that's, you know, I wasn't sure what to expect when I first heard that song because I'm like, oh, it's got Paul on it. So I was waiting for those vocals and, you know, maybe they were going to give him a couple verses or something to sing. And there's his bass. I'm like, cool. Well, that's different, right? That's not what I expected. So I'm totally cool with it.
It's funny on the drum thing. I too feel that it sounds like it sounds like the drums are double and triple tracked sort of thing. Like they sound very filled out and fuzzy sort of thing. And you know, I mean, Steve Jordan. I mean, there's the idea that there's the approximation of a Charlie. I got in heck for this as well too. This is almost a whole show that we could do, but you know, I have no doubt that Mike Portnoy, if you said give me your Charlie Watts, he'd sit there on a stool and think for about 90 seconds and say, okay, I'm ready. And then he'd play it and if you didn't know, you'd say, oh my God, that has so much soul. Well, look how amazing he is playing behind the beat and all this stuff, right? You know, I said it rather crudely in the review. I think I said, look, anybody could do that, right? But what I mean is that, yeah, given you know a virtuoso drummer, he'd figure it out, right? They're not all robots. They're not all like they have no groove, right? Kind of thing, right? But yeah, okay, I'll move on and read a couple more comments here. Baz63 says a superb effort by a band that should be by rights not be this energized and this damn good given their vintage. Look, they're in the studio, right? This is we can do anything, right? That's basically the point. Yeah. Still getting used to the production, which makes the guitars sound a little metallic. That is true. Bite My Head Off. Those do not sound like Rolling Stone guitars, right? They're just too Hot Topic, emo band, metal, Andrew Watt, proper, perfect modern production sound, right? Still getting used to the production, which makes the guitar sound a little, oh yeah, I said that, but that is my only concern. It seems like 80 is the new 50 by the sound of these guys. If it is to be their last recording, they've certainly gone out with a bigger bang while someone had to set it. Karis Marzoli 2170 says, good review, Pete, and I agree with your 3.5, 3.75 star rating. You got in trouble for that, right? The rating being too sober, conservative, right? You know, this is the reviewer's plight, right? Not giving everything a 5 or a 4.5, right?
Yeah.
I've got to take issue though with your take on Tell Me Straight. It's my second favorite song of the album after Mess It Up, and vocally Keith sounds great, the best he sounded since the early 70s. That's what quitting smoking has done for him. Wow, so he's making all these points. Keith sounds amazing, right? So I love mood and the flow of the song. I always love the Keith's sung songs, though. He's an underrated singer with great emotional display. It's a very good album overall. Definitely suffers from Charlie's absence. The drumming on some of these tracks really beats you over the head. Yeah, that's the other thing. The drums are really stadium rock sounding. That's the other way of putting it, right? Let's see. I could tell instantly when Mess It Up came on that this was one of Charlie's tracks. He just had the heart. Hard to define excellence, but you know it when you hear it. No one else sounds like him. Well, that's true. I mean, that is the amazing thing about Charlie and about a dozen drummers, right? I mean, it's hard to have your own sound on the drums, and Charlie totally invented a song. That's why we love Charlie, right? But to say nobody can do Charlie or nobody can do Ringo, I think is not really true. So, anyways, I'll stop there.
Yeah, I mean, we could sit and talk about the drum thing all day long. And we all miss Charlie, right? And there's something that was always so great about his in the pocket simplicity, right? And that yeah. All right, Troy Schultz. When I'm mixed age, I only hope I'm not pissing myself if I live that long. What the hell do you want? The album sounds solid to me. And then Mark Haslow says, this is what I would expect the Stones to sound like in the 2020s. Not crazy about Angry, but the album as a whole is pretty solid. Reminds me of the Bridges to Babylon sound, but with a more laid-back approach lyrically. And Lady Gaga sounds great on Sweet Sounds of Heaven. The guest thing doesn't bother me as long as it's good. Yeah, I mean, So part of me, and again, I saw lots of comments kind of pointing in this direction. Are we just do we just it's almost like the grandpa effect, right? It's like, oh, grandpa, grandpa's older, grandpa's so adorable, so anything grandpa does is a good thing because we still have grandpa, right? We all think of our grandparents that way, and it's, that's natural. So is that effect, are we getting that with the Stones as well? The fact that we're just happy that they're still here, so anything they put out, we're going to automatically say we give them the pass. In other words, I like I said, I think this is a really good album, but I think part of it too is like we're just happy that they're still here with us, yeah. Because part of it, plenty of us are probably saying to ourselves, God, if I was in Mick's position or Keith's position and I was that age, would I even be bothered doing this? Who knows where I would be, what I'd be doing at that point in time. So we just kind of like, we take for granted that it's the Stones. However old they are, they're going to come out, they're going to do something, and we're going to give it our all and try and like it as best we can. And how much of that kind of layover is happening across the board. So I don't know.
You made another really interesting point that I'm coming around to. This idea that this is really memorable track to track. Like the tracks are all quite different. They stand on their own and you do remember them, right? So that is a little different. I think the previous bunch of albums might be a little more even-handed, where almost everything they're doing is a Stones trope. And here there's a bunch of things that aren't a Stones trope. Although I think the great thing about this album that is the most Stones tropey is the riffs, most of the riffs throughout. So the guitars really sound like Stones. Although a couple of funny comments that I think are true and interesting, and people might want to compare. Bite your head off. Bite my head off. Bite what is it? Yeah. Bite my head off. It is sort of the riff of Sex Pistols' Liar. And then Whole Wide World is the riff of Iggy Pop 5'1" from 1979's New Values. Kind of interesting. So you can hear that on those. And to go back to this point of these old guys, I mean, I really want to love this album, right? And I do like I say, I'm pretty on board with half of it or even over half of it, right? Half of it, full songs pretty much. And then the other half of it, there are deal breakers in those songs that make me say, I don't like that song, but most of the parts I'm kind of on board with, kind of thing. So it's kind of a weird thing that way, but yeah. So let me read a couple more comments here. Let's see. Kirk Dan K1191 says, glad your review is better than Martin's. I've been a fan of his since the 90s and have checked out many albums based on his reviews, and some of them have been dreadful. I agree 80% of the time with him. I've read many of his books, etc. When he hated the album, I really couldn't understand it. It's quite good. I found all their albums since Undercover to be awful. In this case, it's like complaining a glass of water is a little too warm if you haven't had one since 85. As a massive Stones fan, since I was 8 in 1978, I'll give it an 8.75 out of 10 stars. Surprised that Keith wasn't the best song on it, as that has been the case since Dirty Work. Interesting. Mick and Andrew Watt are the MVPs. Well, that's telling. So this guy's saying it's a Mick and Andrew Watt album, right? He rates it super high. Here's another point that I've seen a lot of people bring up, right? And this happens with all of us with these albums, right? Happens with Maiden a lot too. A lot of people are saying, yeah, you really like it now, but it's going to wear off on you, right? So some people are saying it's going to grow on you. And I've seen a lot of comments on Facebook and whatnot saying, you know what, live with it a while. I guarantee you after a couple months, you're not going to be saying this is such a great album anymore. So that's a funny thing that happens with these Leviathan albums as well. We want to love it so badly, right? And we're in there and we're part of the whole thing and part of the big happy family of it. But yeah, a lot of people will say it'll wear off on you. And the funny thing is when we say, oh, it'll grow on you, right? But how many times do we really play these albums so much that they are going to grow on us anymore? There's too
Well,
much music out there, right?
there is, and another thing too, Mark, we don't have radio to help us with that, right? Because
Yeah,
in past years,
good point. Yeah,
radio would take tracks from these albums, these new albums, and play them. And every like 6 months, you'd get a new single release from the album, so the album would live on for us because we would get reminded all the time we listen to the radio. That doesn't happen anymore. Is anything off this album going to be played? I mean, first of all, who listens to radio even more anymore? But even like satellite radio that people do check out, are you going to hear anything from this on there? Probably not, right? So it's almost like 6 months from now, for a lot of people, yeah, this goes on the shelf with all the other Stone stuff, and you go and you pick out Sticky Fingers again, right?
yeah.
And that's this. That's the
It's funny. It's almost like what you're saying is a good thing about radio is now in the reverse, because now everybody focuses on Angry for a couple of months or whatever, Sweet Sounds of Silence. So it's almost like front ending the hoopla about it even before there is the album, right? Which happened in radio, of course, as well. But like you say, radio is more like to give an album legs, and these are almost like they stick the legs in front of the album, right?
Yeah,
sort of
yeah,
thing.
yeah. That's why I'm not a big fan of these like pre-release single things, right? Because they're meant to get buzz for the album, but then once the album comes out, a couple months later, that's it. We get nothing else. So, and I think that does the album some disservice. Yeah. All right.
Got any more comments there?
What's that?
Got any more comments there?
I do, yeah. From Waste Some Time with the Average. I'm liking the album. They did what Aerosmith should have done with Music from Another Dimension. It rocks. I took that one out specifically because, to me, Music from Another Dimension, and you could pick a couple other Aerosmith albums in more recent times. They before they released, they said, yeah, we're going to put out a classic sounding Aerosmith album. I don't think that album necessarily sounds like a classic sounding Aerosmith album, and it's not memorable. This, to me, is a memorable album. And the first thing I thought of when I heard this album was like, oh, it kind of hits me like Some Girls did. And I picked that album specifically because that's got lots of good feels on it, lots of different variety and things like that. Whereas Music from Another Dimension doesn't take me back to any previous Aerosmith dimension whatsoever. So yeah, could Aerosmith learn a trick or two from the Stones? Absolutely. I would argue even that Bridges to Babylon or any other recent Stones album still sounds like the Stones. The songs may not be as good as early stuff, but it still sounds like the Stones. I have issues with a lot of latter period Aerosmith records because it just doesn't sound to me like classic Aerosmith anymore.
But, Aerosmith has the same problem as the Andrew Watt problem, but their problem is more like, we kind of like new country. We kind of still like power ballads, right?
Yeah.
So theirs is more of like an outside songwriter pop problem, right? And liking certain things. They do pop as well. I mean, even just push play, you get Steven, who kind of invented hip hop, maybe, right? You get him being more hip hop too. So you got hip hop, you got new country, you got the continuation of the power ballad, right? So they got their own problems, right? The outside songwriters, the guest stars. So they're doing a bunch of these things too. So Stones basically didn't do it as bad as Aerosmith did. I mean, I think people were definitely more negative on Music for Another from Another Dimension and Just Push Play way more than any of my cranky complaints about pop on this album, right? Yeah. So yeah, this, I mean, frankly, this has gotten mostly good reviews by a long shot, right?
Yeah.
But again, I think you could dispel a good chunk of those reviews by just the bloom being it's brand new and loving it immediately, right? So anyways, I'll rattle through a couple more here. I'll go off my last three here. Mark Durian says, it's funny because the Keith Richards track has really touched me right away. Very moving song. On the other hand, Sweet Sounds of Heaven doesn't do it for me. Too long, too much. My favorite track so far, Angry, Whole Wide World, Tell Me Straight. Let's see. Carrot 4095 says, love the fact that they didn't feel the need to fill the CD like past albums. Under an hour is the perfect length for any album. That's a good point. I mean, yeah, it's some long stuff on other ones. Otherwise, it's filler to fill the CD. I don't feel, even when I'm not liking some of these songs, I don't feel like they're filler. That's the kind of the weird thing. I
Yeah.
feel like they're just kind of modern experiments that rub me the wrong way, right? But I don't feel a lot of filler on this album, and
Yeah,
that
I'm
is
not like completely disinterested with anything on this album. No.
yeah. I'm if I am disinterested, I'm strongly disinterested. So that's no bad press is good press or whatever they call it, right? And the last one here I'll read. Let's see. Popoff. Never let a critic tell you which music to buy or not to buy. Always listen for yourself. YouTube is like a radio that you can listen to and hear most everything. All Popoff did was complain like a clown. Maybe he's mad because the Stones did not give him a press pass. Unlike Popoff, Pete still has his integrity. Good job, CMT. Yeah.
Press pass. What kind of press pass you going to be getting?
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, that's kind of an interesting point because that's what junkets were all about, right? Let's get this, in the old days, Tim Henderson's been on some junkets where they flew him to London to sit down and listen to an Iron Maiden album, right?
yeah.
You come home and you're probably going to be pretty favorable on that album when you get a junket or whatever. But
Yeah.
no, I haven't been turned down for anything, nor was I offered anything. So
There you go.
yeah.
All right, from Paul H6673, 100% agree with this review. It just has that uncanny valley feel of something entirely computer generated. Exactly the same as the last few Ozzy albums. Absolute zero earthiness, soul, or rock and roll, just an approximation. The songs in themselves are actually not too bad, if a bit written by committee, but the album is just entirely killed by the AI feel. My fear, Martin, is that going forward, everybody's going to say that about every album created. Everything sounds too AI. It's like, and everybody just is going to assume that albums were created by AI. Yeah. Is that just going to be the narrative going forward? I hear that a lot lately about a lot of things. I heard that about the new Priest song. I heard that about the KK's Priest album. I'm hearing it about the Stones. Is every album going to be plagued by people saying that now just because it's maybe a little overproduced?
One key exception, Dawkins' new album, right? They definitely didn't AI Don's vocals, and even the production is pretty gritty on that.
Yeah,
record.
I haven't heard it yet. Yeah, everybody's saying it's really good. I haven't heard it yet.
But you're right. I've seen all these complaints about the Priest song as well. I mean, it's in the old days, like last year and previously, it's more like everybody's using all the computery studio things, but the term AI wasn't part of that. Now AI, like you say, is going to be part of it.
Yeah, it's part of every conversation, no matter what you talk about. So
yeah.
I got one more here from Prog Me Up. He says it's all in the mix. The same mastering engineer also did Steven Wilson's new album, and that sounds fantastic. So praise Watt for the arrangement ideas he brought in and blame Watt for an overcompressed, flat, superficial mix. Watt can continue being a producer, but he needs a mixing engineer, at least for any rock albums he'll work on in the future. Interesting. That's
yeah. Yeah, both of those are pretty insightful. And the previous one was, talking about the songs by committee and stuff. And you see the credits on here and it doesn't act like it's by committee. But if you look at the credits in the album, they're like thanking, every song has this pile of people who worked on them, sort of thing. But I have a feeling in Stone's world, it's like they protect the credits, but other people might have helped somewhat, right?
It's possible. And you have to wonder, there's all this talk about they have enough material that they recorded for these sessions for a whole other album. If we're going to get that, and maybe that will be a little different than this, or will the leftovers, what didn't make the album? I don't know. Have you heard any additional information on that, Martin? As far as
no, not particularly. I just like I say, I suppose I hope they tone down on the production and stuff. But yeah, I wish bands, when they had that happen, and they never really do this, but it would be interesting if they were smart enough to take a whole pile of things of a certain style and put them aside and say, let's make an album with a different personality, right? Yeah. Because too many albums these days are ticking off the boxes. You need one of that, one of that, one of that, one of that sort of thing. There's a bit of that here, but like I say, I'm coming around to your opinion that that every song on here is a little island that you can discuss. They've all got a reason behind them. There's not filler. I just happen to hate some of it, right? But I hate it and love it kind of thing. There's not very much that I'm like, think is filler. So
Yeah, and I quite to me, this album was kind of refreshing because did you like their last album, all the blues covers? Was that Lonesome?
no, I don't care about any of that sort of stuff.
I mean
Don't.
that it is what it was, and there was more of a gritty album, and doing these modern interpretations of all these old blues classics, and that for me was good for a couple listens, and I haven't pulled that out since. So to me, this is much more of an engaging, enjoyable listen. I would rather hear stuff like this any day than them doing blues covers, and so I'm happy they went and did something like this. I don't have an issue with it at all, and I think even. I was in my initial review, I think, like I said, I think I gave it 3.5 out of 5. I still kind of stand by that, but I think it's pushing up a little bit because this is one of those things the more I listen to it, the more I'm enjoying it. And some of the songs that maybe I was kind of like not 100% hooked on from the beginning are starting to, like Depending on You is starting to sit better with me. Dreamy Skies, even Tell Me Straight, it still might be one of my least favorites on the album. I'm enjoying it more than I did. But yeah, the rest of it, I really enjoy quite a bit. And like I said, I think today, if you were to ask me like what my favorite tracks on here, my top 3, I think Live by the Sword is the most traditional sounding Stones track on the album. I mean, that's really, really good. I love Whole Wide World. And I don't know, but I know you don't like it as much as me, but I think Mess It Up is a lot of fun. And I dig Angry. Love the video. God, you got Sydney Sweeney careening on top of the car all through the whole thing. How can you not like that, right?
Yeah.
And Get Close, I think, is really good. So
yeah, mine would be Live by the Sword, Drive Me Too Hard, Tell Me Straight, Sweet Sounds of Heaven, and Get Close. I want to bring up one more point. I mean, we heard the one guy complain about the lyrics. In my review, I was very positive about the lyrics, and I'm still positive about the lyrics. I think they pack a lot of action into the lyrics. There's a lot of relationship stuff, and it's kind of violent and pushing and shoving and stuff. But one point I made in there that I've always felt about Stone's lyrics is when they have drama, right, between people, it's drama that the 0.001% has to deal with. It's the drama of people who have 3 or 7 houses, right? It's like when you run out on an argument and you're a Stone, you just go to one of your other houses or something, right?
Yeah.
Sort of thing. So it's really funny. It's like when they talk about drama between personal relationships, when you're 2 or 3 of the 50 most famous people in the entire world, right? You have been for decades. It's like they do a great job of taking out all the extraneous boring words and giving you a really tight story. And when they do that, the drama that you get is almost hard to understand because we can't understand what it's like to be that famous and that rich, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's really cool. It's like they're showing you that they have problems just between people too, right? That money can't buy you happiness, sort of thing. But when you read it, it's really funny that you sort of can't relate at the same time because it's almost like they're having 5 or 6 different emotions that you don't have.
And it's personal to them, not to us, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the way they explain it, it's like they're explaining it like people from Mars, like they're these weird aliens that live in this different world. It's like, oh, when we argue, we do it this way, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I will say the one song on the album, which the lyrics to me are a little kind of ridiculous, but that's Bite My Head Off. Did you actually sit down and read this? I mean, why you bite my head off? Why you bite my head off? Why you get so pissed off? Why you bite my head off now? Yeah, come on. Why you bite my head off? Acting such a jerk off. Why you have to mouth off? I got the world to worry about. Yeah, if I was a dog, yeah, you would kick me down. I'll be spending the night howling round your house, but I ain't on a leash. Yeah, well, I ain't got a chain. You think I'm your bitch? I'm fucking with your brain. I mean, come on, that's ridiculous. And it's almost like, to me, I try to look past those lyrics when I listen to it because just hearing Mick at his age singing that stuff, I'm just kind of like, oh my God, that's a little weird for me. But I like the song as it is. But yeah,
they're trying to be a punk rocky sort of song, right? They're trying to be belligerent. It's a little bit.
I mean, I get
cover album feel or whatever.
Yeah.
And the funny line in there that kind of drives my point is where he says, "I have the whole world to worry about," right? So like these people are running a very large organization, right?
Oh yeah, it's a corporation here. Yeah.
So it's like that whole thing when you hear rock stars say, "Oh man, I don't want to go on tour, but I got to go on tour." I mean, all my roadies got to eat, right? They got to live and stuff. It's like I got to go on tour. There's a whole pile of people that got to get paid, and so I guess I got to get out there and sing those songs, right? It's really refreshing and cool when you see that, right? You don't really think about that, right? But yeah, so Mick Jagger is Mick Jagger is probably one of the 10 most famous people in the world in any discipline, right?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
absolutely. I would
Paul
absolutely.
McCartney, Donald Trump. There's not a lot on that list, right? That you would bring up before Mick Jagger, right?
Yeah, it's very few.
So, the Queen, although she's no longer with us, but 2 years ago I would have said the Queen. But yeah, I think they did a pretty good job of the lyrics and not making them too I don't think they bent on that willow as far over to modern pop as they might have, right? I think they still stuck to a Stone's integrity when it came to the lyrics.
So Martin, if you had to rate this album out of 5 stars, what would you give it?
Oh, out of 5, eh? Yeah, I'd go 3. It'd be 3? A 3.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're not too far from each other on that.
No.
So I think it's enjoyable. So once again, for the last and final time on either Sea of Tranquility or the Contrarians, let us know your thoughts on Hackney Diamonds down in the comments below, and stay tuned next week for a completely different topic as we move on from the Stones into something else. So Martin, give us an update on books and Contrarians and podcast and all that good stuff.
Yeah, we just had a really, really good panel show go up on the Contrarians. Matt just a mountain of information on Blue Oyster Cult Club Ninja. So that was really cool. The last podcast episode of my audio podcast, History in 5 Songs, was albums inspired by New York City.
Oh, cool.
So that was cool. And the book situation is all at martinpopoff.com. Still got the Who book, still got the Floyd, the Bowie, and the Blue Oyster Cult panel book is still doing good. And yeah, lots always coming down the pipes on Contrarians as well. We just did the album cover show, which was a really weird and hard one to do. Back cover doppelgangers. So we picked back covers that look like other back covers.
Wow.
It's a funny show. There's a lot of complaining how hard it was. Yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine. You got to go looking at everything.
But it's fun. We came up with some great stuff. So
yeah, I like right off the top of my head, I don't know if I could think of any.
Yeah. Well, one cool one that I put on, not to brag about myself, but I'm just remembering one that I thought was neat that I came up with. We all had 10 each, right? But it's interesting how on the back of Sammy Hagar All Night Long, the live album, Sammy it's just a picture of Sammy doing the splits, jumping up in the air. And then on Van Halen 2, 1979, on the back cover, you've got David Lee Roth doing the splits.
Wow, how ironic, huh?
Yeah.
How ironic. Yeah, I couldn't think of any off. I'd have to really look. That's a really tough one. The fact that you all came up with.
Well, I told these guys, well, it'd be hard for you because you're mostly CD, right? But yeah. I told these guys, stop complaining. The way you do this is you pull out a bunch of your albums, because it's back covers is mostly an album story, right? That's the other problem, right? Yeah. But I said, just pull out a chunk of your albums, right? This many, however many you can hold up. You know how it all used to work in the old days. There's a certain amount you can pick up without dropping them all, right? Yeah. So you pick them up, you lay them down on a chair or whatever backwards, and you just flip through them and wait until a light bulb goes off. It's like, I've seen something like that before. And you pull it out, you write it down, and you just keep flipping, you know. So that's how you do it. So
that makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, it was fun.
There's probably way more out there than I'm even thinking of right now. So I'll have to go watch that episode. Because now I'm curious. It's making me think. I'm like,
Oh, there's some hilarious stuff that came up. Yeah.
I can imagine.
The Bay Area thrash Joshua tree that came up. So anyways, I'll leave it at that. You could check it out.
All right. So what do we got coming up here on the channel? Let's see. Today is Friday. So so we've got two more shows coming up today. So we've got the Professor's Picks coming up at 3. So check that out. Ken Golden will be telling you all about new release day. So it's Friday, of course. And then tonight we have the November installment of 4 Fusion Friday for all you fusion nuts. Check it out. Talking about all instrumental music. We'll be taking a look at 4 really cool albums. We've got Jeff Beck Wired. We've got Simon Phillips Protocol 4. We have Brand X Masks and Alan Holdsworth Mental Fatigue. Those are the 4 albums in question. So we'll be looking at those tonight. Tomorrow, we've got the UK Connection with Simon and Stephen, of course, and we'll be doing another ranking the songs on a classic album. And that classic album is Marillion's Misplaced Childhood. And then on Sunday, the 4 Fusion guys, George and Eric, will be joining me once again for ranking the albums, and we'll be ranking the 3 Liquid Tension Experiment albums, which of course is a very cool instrumental side project from Tony Levin and a bunch of guys from Dream Theater. And now we can safely say that a bunch of guys from Dream Theater is in fact in place once again, because Mike Portnoy has rejoined Dream Theater. So yeah, so stay tuned for all that, and visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook, we're on YouTube, all together, all the damn time. Thanks for watching this episode of Friday Morning at the Funhouse. Till next Friday, for Martin Popoff, I am Pete Pardo. Have a good weekend, everybody. See you real soon. Bye-bye.